like paper number 2, I think paper number 3 was pretty challenging for you, but that's good. It's always good to be challenged. So I just wanted to review some points on this and help you out a bit more. Make sure that when you write these essays, I'm basing these essays based on what you're reading and learning in the book. That's why on the prompt it asks you to read a certain section from something you've already read or will read. So make sure that you're drawing in the information from the textbook into your writing. I feel like people maybe didn't either understand what the text was saying or didn't understand the prompt. I don't quite know what the problem was. So if you want to let me know, that would be great, so I can know what to improve if it's something that I can help in the future. Otherwise, just be really aware of what you're doing. Paper number 4 is another paper just like this. It's really difficult, but so long as you use what you've learned in the readings, you should be able to do it just fine. So I'm going to review a little bit about what was covered, I believe in chapter 6. Was it chapter 6? Yeah, it's chapter 6. So if you want to go back and review it, probably wouldn't hurt. And when I was grading the reflection activity, it seemed like some of you weren't quite grasping the information to the depth that I would like to see. So maybe you didn't get it when you read it, and then it was difficult for you to apply it into this paper. So I don't know what the problem was. If it was something I can help with, let me know. So I want to start with discussing the difference between interpretation and argumentation, because a couple of the papers that I read were simply arguments. They weren't an interpretation at all. They were a researched argument, and that is not the point of this paper. So arguments use sources to prove a point. We discussed, what argumentation was, several weeks ago, and analysis and argument are not the same thing, and an interpretation and an argument are not the same thing. An interpretation does have to be proven. It does have to have support and things like that, but it's not an argument in a researched argument essay sense. Okay? So you don't need sources to prove a point. Instead, you are using texts. I didn't say to include sources in your paper. I said to include texts. And I'll hopefully come back to that in just a second. So interpretations are a conclusion that you draw upon an analysis you do of one or more texts. In this case, I asked you to find 3 or 4 texts that create a trend, and then to draw a conclusion about that trend, and that is where your interpretation comes in. So for some of you who wrote more of an argument paper, you didn't interpret because you didn't draw a conclusion based on the trend that you saw. You may have argued about a trend, or argued that a trend was good or bad, or something like that, but you did not interpret the trend based on the text that you use. There's a huge difference, and if you don't see that difference, you have to let me know. And I'll try to reword it another way. So remember, you're not arguing using sources in this essay. You're interpreting 3 to 4 texts to find a trend. You don't need sources to make your point. You're using your logic and the text that you choose as your support, not outside sources. Now, what is a trend? Most of you, I believe all of you, got a trend, which is great. You saw something that was repeatedly happening, and the problem came when you tried to discuss it. You were arguing about it instead of interpreting it. So everybody's okay in terms of what a trend is. It's just an idea that you see repeated over and over again. Hopefully I'll remember to come back to that, because I have a list of all your topics. But again, I don't think anybody had a problem really finding a trend. It was how you discussed it and what you did with that trend. Okay, so interpretation looks at multiple texts to find meaning and answers why the trend exists. That's the huge piece that most of you are missing. You're not discussing why that trend is occurring. So the easiest way to do this is to relate it to culture. And I'm going to give you an example in just a second, and that's exactly what I did. And I think all of your topics are perfectly capable of doing that. So instead of arguing, saying that this trend exists or this trend is good or bad, That has nothing to do with what you should be writing about. You should be looking at the text that you choose and answer why that trend is even there. Okay, again, if this does not make sense to you, you have to let me know. And then again, point number 3, or the point of paper number 3 was to interpret, not argue. And too many of you are arguing and not interpreting. And some of you that are interpreting are doing a really weak interpretation. Okay, so it was really hard to judge these papers because some of them were really well written, but they had absolutely nothing to do with interpretation. And so I have to be honest and say, if I see that in the portfolio, it's not going to pass because you're not doing the assignment correctly, no matter how good your writing is. So keep your really good writing, but fulfill the requirements of this essay. That goes for all of them. If your summary is not a summary, I can't let it pass. If your compare and contrast essay doesn't do exactly what I asked you to do, it can't pass. And same with this one. Same with paper number 4. If they don't do what I ask you to do, they won't pass. That's the point. I'm not just working on your writing, I'm working on your thinking. So make sure that if you don't understand any of this, you have to let me know, and I will do my best to clarify it even further. Okay, so here's an example. This is what I would do if I had to write this essay. I tried to pick a topic that would be fun and engaging for you, and I think it hopefully was based on your topics. We just need to work on how you present what you're writing. Okay, so the trend that I would write about is young adult fiction that centers on heroines who save humanity. They're everywhere. It is a huge trend, but the 3 texts that I would use are The Hunger Games, Uglies, and Divergent. If any of you like The Hunger Games, read Uglies and Divergent, and then the other books that follow those. They're excellent. And I'm not really talking about the series here. I'm just talking about this specific Hunger Games book, the first one. Uglies is the first in a trilogy, and Divergent is the first in a trilogy. Okay, I just felt I should clarify that. Okay, so I'm using 3 different novels, young adult fiction novels, that have a heroine. All of them fight a government or a authority and save everybody. Okay, they're all different in how they approach that, but they all do the same thing. So here's what my interpretation based on these things would be. These novels serve as a cultural litmus test, demonstrating that the youth of our country needs guidance in how to be leaders, how to stand up for themselves and what is right, how to fight conformity, and how to serve others before themselves. These novels, though science fiction, are based on present cultural issues and reflect those issues through the characters, plot, and themes. Okay, I'm not saying that that's my thesis statement, but that's pretty much my interpretation on any book that's like these. I'm just specifically using these 3. Do you see how this is an interpretation? This is the conclusion that I'm drawing based on the message of these 3 books. Okay, so here are my texts. Here is my interpretation of those texts. Okay, I don't need sources to support this. All I need are evidence from these 3 books. That's all I need. I don't need outside research. So if any of you had outside research, take it out and take it out of your paper. Take it off your works cited page. Take out any quotes, any references. You don't need it. That's not the point. That's what a research paper does. This simply uses the text that you analyze and then create an interpretation. Okay, you start to see the difference there? So in my paper, I would develop these main points, and I would, of course, relate them back to my interpretation. It's obviously hard because I'm not going to sit down and write this essay for you because you probably wouldn't read it anyway, but these are the ideas that you should be starting with. Okay, so there's my interpretation, and I would prove my interpretation using these points. Each of the books uses a heroine. I see that these books do that because girls today need positive role models, because the crap that they see on TV is not, going to be beneficial for them. It does nothing but tear them down and make them feel like crap. Okay? So I'm focusing on the female aspect of this. There are a lot of books like this that have masculine, heroes. but I'm focusing on the fact that all of these are girls. Oop, I didn't bold this one. Government and authority. I would develop this because all of these books show oppression. And I think that people today feel a lot of oppression. There's a lot of recent, in the last few years, a lot of government stuff, healthcare, gun control, all that garbage that makes people feel really forced into how they are supposed to live. And of course, America was not necessarily built on that idea. So I think people are really starting to feel that pressure. And I think that pressure is reflected in these novels. Conformity, another huge issue that I see in these books that's very much a part of our culture. The media tells us to all be the same. And it's not just the media, our peers, anyone. Go to school, go to your family even. And if you don't fit in, you're outcasted and you're alienated because you're viewed as different. All of these girls face that problem. All the girls are one of, a few. They're not alone in their rebellion, but pretty much everybody else fits one specific mold. And I see that happening in our culture. Okay, then indoctrination, not necessarily a bad thing. Parents and teachers and leaders teach you good things, but these books take that to the extreme. And I would think that even you today are taught that from their friends, that they're indoctrinated by their friends, and they're not. Basically, the underlying point is that they're not encouraged to think for themselves. And you see these in all of these novels. And it's the girls who fight this indoctrination and pulls everybody else out of it. And the last thing I might mention is friendship. Because friends are a huge part of these novels. And these days, the kids who, lose it and go on rampages don't tend to have many friends, much support at home. So I think that part of the book really reflects that we need to find that help and support in our life. So does this make sense? This is an example. I want you to look at it. I want you to think about it. I want you to look at what I've done and make your topic do what I've done. Okay, so make sure you have a nice, good interpretation and that you develop it through these points. Okay? So here are the topics that you guys came up with, and they're all really good. There's no reason you can't work with what you already have. You just have to interpret it, not argue it. Okay, some of you are arguing and you need to be interpreting. Just looking over the list and see if there's anything specifically I wanted to mention. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to give all of you a shout out that your topics are good. That's not the problem. You each have texts, I believe, that are specific and analyzable. You simply need to take out your sources, stop arguing, work with your topic, look at your text, and then interpret them. That's the piece that's missing. Okay? The other items in the papers is that you're still narrating and using you. There's a little bit of improvement, but it's still there way too often than I would like to see. In paragraph length. Pretty much, your papers, 2 of them so far have been, well, one's been 3 pages, I think. One's been 3 pages, one has been 4, and one's been 5. I'm trying to think if your summary was 2 or 3. Whichever it was, I don't know. None of your papers are long enough to have particularly long paragraphs. And your paragraph length reflects your ability to organize your thoughts. So at no time should you ever have a paragraph that comes close to even a half a page long. And some of you, especially in this paper for some reason, had 2-page long paragraphs. Not okay. If your paragraph, you should be able to have 2 full paragraphs on every single page. If not, you need to look at places where you can cut them down and split them into multiple and then develop if you need to. Usually there's a natural break in there. So just be aware of your paragraph length because, again, that goes back to your organization. So hopefully this helped clear up some things. If not, let me know. Shoot me an email and I will do the best I can to clear it up even more. But good attempt with paper number 3. But there's a little revision to be done. So good luck.